Who is it? Oh, it's getting closer!
That's right, the new Stones album is getting closer, and it's about time.
Who said that?
Sorry. So, as we wait for the new Stones album to arrive, I thought it would be good to go back in time and retrace their steps and follow the timeline on the recording of this new album. I think fans would get a kick out of hearing this story. Plus, by the end of it, I think we'll appreciate this new album even more. So, if you're up for it, let's go. Before I start, a huge thank you to the website timeisonourside.com for allowing me to use their amazing research and all the quotes used in this video. Every Stones fan should have this website bookmarked. To get the full story, we have to actually go back to 2005. That was when they released A Bigger Bang, which was their last album of strictly new original material. After the album, they embarked on a tour to promote the album. And that's usually how the Stones work. They would write an album, go on a tour for it, take about a 1 or 2 year breather, come back, put out a new album, tour that, and then repeat. So that was usually how they worked. So in 2007, they just completed the tour for A Bigger Bang, which was one of their longest tours ever. Keith suffered an incredible head injury while on vacation during the tour. Add to that 2 years prior, Charlie had beaten cancer. So by this point, the band was pretty beat up and had gone through the ringer.
And then the whole tour is 2 years, so it's like 3 years, really. It's 3 years, the whole thing, so I've been living with this for 3 years now. So then twice to the United States, twice to Europe, and South America and Rio, and to Japan and China. Where else? So it's been great. Played to loads of people. It was almost a fearful thing, you know, to contemplate the end of a tour, because I'm going to feel incredibly alone. At the same time, you really want to say, 140 whatever shows, and you know, you deserve a rest, and the body's saying, yeah, you need a rest, you know.
This now sets the stage for the Stones' longest period of inactivity since World War III. For those who don't know, World War III is Keith's affectionate term for the breakdown of the band during the late 80s. Mick and Keith were not on good terms, which led to a hiatus for the band that lasted 3 years. Anyway, back to 2007. They had just come off the humongous Bigger Bang tour, and they were looking for a break. Little did they know that that break would balloon to 5 years. This 5-year break eventually would have negative impacts on the band. Although they stayed very busy in the following years, that would make recording new music fall lower and lower in the priority list. 2008 and 2009 were focused mainly on supporting and promoting the new concert film Shine a Light, directed by Martin Scorsese. And since they were still recuperating from the last big tour, there was really no plans to perform, much less recording new music. In March 2008, Keith says, "I think we might make another album once we get over doing promotion on this film." So Keith is optimistic, thinking that there's going to be new music. It's clear that it's just an idea floating around the band, and it's not really set in stone quite yet. It needs to be noted that around this time, a series of projects began that, in my opinion, contributed to the band postponing recording new music. Around this time, we saw the beginning of the new deluxe archival anniversary editions of a lot of their classic albums. And for a lot of people who may have enjoyed those sets over the years may have noticed that a lot of those came with bonus discs of unreleased material and songs that fans had never heard before. Well, a lot of work went into preparing those songs for release.
So I went in, and Keith and I looked, and I looked with Don was a producer, and we looked at all these tracks, and some of them were sent by people that thought they were like Stones experts. And I looked at them, I said, this does not sound like Exile. So some of them were not in the time of Exile at all. So I had to sort of define the time of what I thought Exile was, because Exile wasn't recorded in a month. It was recorded over a 3-year period. So I took this 3-year period and found tracks that were recorded in that 3-year period. And some of them, the alternate takes, I just left as they are. And some tracks didn't have any songs on them, any vocals.
But nothing new?
New in what way?
New recording for the album?
Yeah, I mean, I did. Some of them had no vocals on them.
Oh, you added vocals?
And they had no song, no vocals, no words, no music, just tracks, which were really good. Some of the tracks were all done and perfect, except I wasn't on them. So I thought, well, okay, so I'm going to do my... So I wrote words and I wrote melodies and sang them on some of them.
So now the studio time that was usually reserved for creating new music was now being reserved for working on these archival anniversary deluxe editions. Another project that was sort of pulling at the band around this time was Keith was working very extensively on his book Life that was going to be published in the next year. So he was sort of distracted with that. And it turns out that the effects of that book was yet another negative impact on the band, which we'll get to in a minute. So, as 2010 arrives, the Stones remain on the promotion circuit. Following the festivities for the re-release of Exile on Main Street, a new documentary film about the making of the album is released, Stones in Exile. The Stones are heavily involved, and Mick and Keith make the rounds on the usual promotional tours across the media. The band is super focused on these projects, again putting off any kind of performing or recording in 2010. Still recuperating after the grueling Bigger Bang tour, the Stones are obviously in an extended vacation, a 3-day weekend if you will. Also, after a total of 5 years of work, Keith's book Life is published in the fall of 2010 to strong reviews by both fans and critics alike. Months would follow of promotion and support for the book. Keith later admitted that the book was a huge emotional and mental undertaking and would need some time to recover.
Do you ever get rusty? Do you ever not play the guitar for a month?
You're looking at a very rusty Keith Richards right now.
No, are you?
Yeah. I do have to do some practice, man, so don't pull me up.
No, I wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do that. But I mean, yeah, you do. You get because anything you need a little.
No, you do. I mean, if you've been on the road for 2 years and then suddenly you stop. And you say, oh, I'll just put the axe away for a little bit, and then a little bit gets on, and you say, I've really got to catch up, man.
Yeah, really, yeah. Because you can't just...
So at the moment, I'm doing a lot of catch-up.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. We were talking, and you said that you're working on these lemon trees.
2011 is a relatively light year for the members as well. No plans are set for any performing this year, nor any recording. The band members keep busy playing guest spots and small gigs in both the UK and the US, but nothing together. After the success of the re-release of Exile on Main Street, the 1978 album Some Girls is now queued up for a re-release. Thus, part of 2011 is devoted to working on the remaster and the bonus track to be included in the new set. So it's clear now that the band's extended vacation from performing has now turned into more of a hibernation, as the band is clearly still reeling over the last world tour. This will play a huge part in how they plan future tours, as we're going to see shortly. Finally, Mick begins to talk about a possible new album coming up. And in September, he says, I have been writing a lot for the Stones. I mean, when I write, I go, yeah, that could be a good Stones tune, or that's not really going to work for that. I did some sessions with Charlie recently where I just played some songs I'd written. And of course, I wrote more when he was there. I started making them up, so that was good fun. So we had a really good time doing that. I've been writing loads of these 12-bar blues songs, so I'm looking forward to doing something more in that vein. But then last night I wrote a song and went straight from my version of Johnny Lee Hooker into writing sort of pop songs, so I don't really know. And this is the beginning of us seeing that really Mick is constantly writing and constantly keeping his bucket full in case there's a need for songs somewhere. He's got an arsenal of songs ready to go. So as we'll see, Mick tends to keep busy. On the flip side though, Keith says, I hardly played at all for 2 years. I'm sort of basically recovering from the book, and this is my therapy at the moment. In the process of doing it, my chops are coming back. Interesting. So Mick seems to be keeping his muscles warm and constantly writing and possibly demoing stuff and working with Charlie. And Keith is sort of hanging back and kind of reapproaching the guitar very slowly. Keith and Ronnie are mentioning a couple things about some new music. I'm not writing for the Stones right now. I'm cutting my own stuff with Steve Jordan. There's no point in writing for the Stones until I know that Mick Jagger's in. He could have every song I've ever written. They're all for him. If he doesn't like them or if he poo-poos them, I take them somewhere else. And then Ronnie says, I think we have so much back catalog that we would go out without new material. But then again, one of the boys might go, no, I wouldn't dream of going out unless we have new material. I don't mind, really. Usual, typical Ronnie, always game for anything. So right now we're seeing that Mick and Keith are a little at odds and in different places when it comes to where they are with new music. Mick may or may not have things that he feels could be right for the Stones. Keith is kind of creating his own arsenal of stuff, and he's maybe feeling either it's not wanted right now or he doesn't feel like these are Stones songs either. So he's sort of beginning to work on what will become Cross-Eyed Heart. So as we go into 2012, we begin to see that the effects of Keith's book Life had more of a negative impact than anyone could have anticipated. Needless to say, Mick wasn't happy with certain elements of the book, and it was clear that this was now going to be a roadblock. And this is what Mick had to say about it. Keith did apologize to my face. So you have to put all that sort of stuff away. Water under the bridge, really. Hopefully, we can carry on working. Prerequisite, you might say? Well, I think it's a good thing he got together with me and said that. I don't really want to talk about it apart from that, but I think it's good that he said it. And yes, it was a prerequisite, really. You have to put those things to one side. You can't leave them unspoken. It's very tempting. English people like to do that quite a lot. They don't like to face up to these things. Sometimes it's easy to push them out of the way, but I think it's good that we had that conversation. And then Keith says, the book came out and whoops-a-daisy, we don't really need to go there. It was something to get out of the bloody way so we could get the band on the road. I'll say sorry to God if you like. I don't give a shit. I said, look forward, brother, look forward. If you was married to somebody for 50 years, you can have your little spats here and there, and we don't mind having them in public occasionally. We can't get divorced. We're doing it for the kids. As I told Mick, you should have seen what I left out. I did also say to Mick, I know exactly what you did. You got the book, you went straight to the index. Jagger, M, and that's what you read. You didn't take it in context. You didn't. So, yeah, we had a little bit of a doodah about that, but I was expecting it. We resolved it in our own way, and I said that I regret if I caused you any, inconvenience or pain or something. It was, I'd say anything to get the band together, I'd lie to my mother. Keith, that's pretty big stuff right there, to have them talk about that stuff so openly. And, it's just a small glimpse in their very complicated dynamic. We could never understand what really goes on between them. And by the way, Keith always refers to the songs and their catalog as the kids. So Keith around this time is working on his own solo work, which would eventually become Cross-Eyed Heart. And then Mick embarks on a side project with a super group called Super Heavy, and the less said about that, the better. Surprisingly, the band was able to get together to record 2 original songs that would be included on a new compilation Greatest Hits album. God, I hate that cover. So now here they were, water under the bridge with whatever was going on between Mick and Keith with the book, and wouldn't you know it, just around the corner would be their 50th anniversary as a band. There would be no doubt that there would have to be some kind of celebrations and some kind of event to mark the anniversary. So despite the growing anticipation for a new album, it was becoming more and more out of reach. The band had not played a full 2-hour set in now close to 5 years. So if there were going to be shows to mark the 50th anniversary coming up, there was going to be a lot of work ahead to get them into playing mode. In 2012, it became official. There would be shows to commemorate the anniversary. So then the focus went to getting performance ready. It wasn't so much an easy task of just dusting off the instruments and jumping on stage. As Ron mentions, it looks like we are going to be doing more stuff. I'm keeping October, November free. That's what I've been told. I'm just awaiting more information. New songs, are you joking? We are familiarizing ourselves with our back catalog and have only scratched the surface. So a little insight that at that point in time, new music is the furthest thing from the band's mind. I mean, they have just now come together after a huge hiatus, and they have some shows coming up that they need to prepare for. So with 2012 over, we see things being patched up between Mick and Keith. The band finally gets together and plays a couple shows, but still no new album, so maybe next year? Well, in 2013, a new trend emerged in the Stones' career that I would suggest is the second reason that contributed to the Stones putting off recording new material. So, starting in 2013, instead of going on extensive world tours, they would instead go on 2 to 3 month tours each year, usually about 1 or 2 continents per year. This sort of would break up the world tour format that they would usually do in one go and break it up in shorter segments. Essentially what was happening was that they wanted to avoid what had happened on the Bigger Bang tour. A long 2-3 year tour just could not happen again. And technically, that was their second mega tour. The Bridges to Babylon tour from '97 also lasted nearly 2 years. So it was clear that they wanted to continue touring, but a new plan had to be devised as they were by this point burnt out on the mega tour format. So with rehearsals for these tours taking about a month, and for Mick, a few extra months to plan out the logistics and do other stuff on the back end, on the business side, almost half a year would be devoted to the Stones by this point. So any room for writing and recording new music was getting further and further away. With this new touring schedule, the time usually devoted to writing and recording new music was completely taken over by their focus on live performing. So it becomes official that 2013 would officially be the tour to commemorate the 50th anniversary. So a tour was set up for the US and the UK for the middle of 2013. To pause here, some editorializing, if I may. I don't think it's a coincidence that around this time Mick isn't necessarily that interested in rushing to the studio to record something new. We were beginning to see the decline of physical media. Albums in general don't necessarily sell as well as they used to. So the market has changed, and I think Mick is sort of reacting to that. I mean, he is a smart guy. He knows where the money is in touring, not necessarily in putting out albums. I mean, the guy did go to the London School of Economics, right? Just an idea, obviously just speculation on my part. On the subject of writing with Mick again, this is what Keith has to say. We could do that too. It's not that we would seek each other out for fun or company. It's a different social thing going on. But we could absolutely get together and sit down and go, let's go in the back room. And then I've got this song, you've got this song. And I've always found working with Mick is like a joy. It's a real pleasure. It's outside of the realm of work is where we tend to disagree. Mick says, I write songs all the time. Actually, I was just finishing doing some yesterday. Keith, we always have some work on the go, and it's about getting off the hiatus and back in the studio. I think we have plans. Don't nail me down, but I got a call from Mick the other day saying sometime this year we better get in the studio. When Mick and I are on the road, we put ideas together, and one thing leads to another. Playing live gives songwriting and recording more impetus, so I'm hoping we can come out with something great over the next few months. So then, shows are planned through the summer from the US to the UK. 2014 came and went with some tours. 2015 saw the Zip Code tour that would bring them across the United States. And it wasn't until the end of 2015 where things started to get interesting. Early in 2015, this is what Mick and Keith had to say about a new album. Mick says, I don't know. It would be very nice, and I've got a lot of new songs and songs I've written over the last couple of years. I've done really good demos for all of them, which I would love to record. So let's hope so. I haven't thought about making a solo album. I'd love to record a Stones album. If that doesn't happen, then yes, that's a truthful answer. I've got songs that would be great for the Stones, and I've got songs that wouldn't be perfect for the Stones. I've been writing this week. I've written a lot of new songs lately, but we haven't recorded them yet. They're about just life in general, different subjects, personal things, social things. And Keith says, we're talking about doing some recording after this tour, but there's nothing definite. We just threw out the idea. I'd like to get the boys back in the studio again. Yeah, anything can happen. 2015, we begin to really see things to pick up. It's now not just an idea in the air. People are now talking about it. And Mick and Keith seem to be on the same wavelength that there needs to be some studio time planned pretty soon. Funny you should mention that. Just last week, the word studio popped up while we were rehearsing. I said, well, let's find a time. I'm ready. Keith continues to talk about a new album. And in August, he says, will we record another album and tour again? In truth, the answer to all that is yes. I think we will. We'll do this year, then go into the studio. I know Mick wants to record again. He blurted it out in a meeting. It's about time we went back and recorded. I was like, we're here to talk about a tour, right? So that will be interesting. End of the year. Okay, so the wheels are in motion. My favorite dream is to get the Rolling Stones off a tour and straight into the studio. It'll probably never happen, but I can hear the band that tight when it's really honed and toned and all the screws are in the right place. A lot of the earlier records we made were in between tours. We'd come straight off the road and go straight into the studio, which is why some of those records have so much bounce and hit on them, the energy. We're playing South America in February and March, and I would like to get in the studio around April or May next year. It's been too long. They need to record. I can feel something in my bones saying we have to record, and maybe the solo album will be a little kick up the arse. As we go deeper into 2015, the momentum is growing for a new album. Keith says, actually, I was in London last week and the boys and I got together. And yeah, there are now definite plans to record. Looks closer. Don't know where, don't know when yet. We had a little chat. We were just saying, we've got to get in the studio, right? Right. That's agreed. Okay, boys, that's agreed. Where, when? We scratch our heads. I would say off the top of my head after the South American tour in February, but you never know. We might try to get into the studio before Christmas. I think that's sort of doubtful with Christmas being Christmas, all that build-up. But at the same time, it's definitely in the works. The Stones are going to get in the studio, which was one of my aims really of doing this one. It was, Hey, Rolling Stones, you haven't been in the studio for 11 years. It's time to get in the studio. At least they've decided yes. I think they've been a bit scared of getting into the studio together. Well, we're going to see what comes out of that, because after this amount of time, there's obviously going to be some rust to knock off. But at the same time, we've been working a lot on the road. The band is hot. I think hotter than I've actually ever heard them. And I think given the right material and everything, I hope they get them in the studio sometime within the, I don't want to give any dates, but in the near future. Continuing the talk, Keith says, there was always a backlog of songs and ideas. Most of those I'm hoping to get the Stones in the studio with. Me, I'd put them in the studio in December, but I know they ain't going to go for that. It's too near Christmas. Mick then jumps in on the conversation. Yes, exhibitionism is about the past, but it's about the present, and it's about what we're going to be doing next. We're not stopping. We're booking studio time for recording this month. We're still on the road. And then finally, it happens. In December of 2015, the official start of sessions for what will become the new album. But an interesting thing happens. Sometime in the middle of working on that new material, they break out into a slew of Chicago blues songs, some of which will become the incredibly successful Blue and Lonesome. Blue and Lonesome would prove to be a major success for the band, garnering them much praise in the months that followed. There was no one more surprised by this than the band themselves. The 5-year break and the years leading up to Blue and Lonesome would represent a sort of reboot for the band. In part 2 of our story, we conclude the journey of this new album. The critical acclaim received by Blue and Lonesome ignites a fire in the band, inspiring them to deliver something very special for their next album. The question is, do they reach that goal? More tours, a global pandemic, the loss of Charlie Watts, more hurdles up ahead, but the Stones do what they do best, push forward. Part 2 of the story coming soon. Hit subscribe so you can see when it's posted. And thank you for watching Hangfire, a Rolling Stones podcast.